Hello, this is Naydelin Garza Jimenez presenting human trafficking in Papua New Guinea for Anthropology 3300, Section 200, People and Cultures of the Pacific. Okay, so to start off with a little bit of background, Papua New Guinea is in the Pacific Ocean, and it is an extremely biodiverse island, and it makes up the eastern half of New Guinea, which its neighboring country would be Indonesia. And this island holds its economy mostly from its natural resources since it is so biodiverse. It has a lot that the people can live off on and that can capitalize off on, specifically mining and fishing. And in recent years, the media has brought attention to human trafficking in Papua New Guinea, especially in regards to what Papua New Guinea is doing about it. How are they responding to human trafficking in their country? So, continuing with the background, there are some laws in Papua New Guinea in relation to human trafficking. In Papua New Guinea, as of 2021, they are a tier 2 country on the watch list for human trafficking. They moved up from a tier 3 country, and I'll get more into that later. But it basically means that they don't quite meet the requirements to completely eliminate trafficking, but they definitely have improved their attempts. And they do have certain things set in motion to prevent and eliminate human trafficking. And Papua New Guinea has loose child labor laws, like the enforcement, and particularly when it comes to letting children work in very hazardous conditions. And Papua New Guinea has made very low efforts to look into human trafficking cases, and they actually did not report any cases at all in 2021. So human trafficking is still going on in the country. It's just not being reported and it is being overlooked. And trafficking in Papua New Guinea essentially can be split into 4 parts. 2 of those actually go together, being labor and children. Trafficking, again, in Papua New Guinea, it is associated with loose labor laws, particularly the enforcement of these laws. And children are those who are exploited the most for it because of their laboring capabilities, because they are younger, because they don't have as much experience as older people. They are able to be put through these horrible hazardous conditions. And another portion of it would be international immigrants. A lot of international immigrants come into Papua New Guinea from neighboring countries in the Pacific Ocean, and they are often exploited and trafficked upon entering the country. And lastly, we do have the trafficking of women in Papua New Guinea. Women are exploited through prostitution and bridal arrangements, mostly, but there are many other things that women are exploited for as well, which I will get into later as well. So, with labor laws and child trafficking, they do go hand in hand in Papua New Guinea. Child trafficking based on labor actually makes up around 1/3 of all human trafficking cases in Papua New Guinea. So it's a massive portion of it that is related to labor and child trafficking. And these children are subject to hazardous labor such as mining and deep sea fishing. Both of these areas of labor are very, very dangerous, and they're very manual. They're very hard on these children. And these children who actually work in these conditions are often abused by criminal gangs. And in some cases, they are actually put to work in these conditions by their own families to pay off familial debt. And by law, children under the age of 16 are not allowed to maintain jobs in Papua New Guinea. But it still occurs. Children as young as 12 can and are still exploited in the country. And the second part of that is that although it is less common than child labor, sexual exploitation is sadly still very frequent in Papua New Guinea, especially among young girls. They are subject to prostitution, and it is often due to the poverty that these girls live in. They are either sold by their family members or put to beg on the streets and to offer up their bodies for services. And this leads me to my next point, which is the trafficking of women in Papua New Guinea. This can be split into two parts, which on the left, we have a more indirect approach to it, and on the right, a more direct approach. So for now, we'll focus on false promises, which is actually a very common scenario in Papua New Guinea, where young women are lured, they're sold into jobs by older men, and they are essentially forced into domestic servitude. And oftentimes, these women and girls do lack education, and they are lured into these jobs on the false promise that they will be receiving an education, even though they will not, and they will be used for their bodies and other things. And the more direct approach is that there is a lot of sex trafficking in Papua New Guinea. Women are sold into sex trafficking rings, and here they can earn money and other valuable things in exchange for their bodies, but it is often not much money that they receive, and they do live in very, very poor conditions. And women are also forced in or put into arranged marriages, and they are also sexually exploited. Their partners usually have more than one wife, and women are not treated as equals in these relationships that they are forced into. And lastly, we do have international immigrant trafficking. And actually, what plays a lot into it is foreign affairs and policies from the countries that surround Papua New Guinea. They do contribute to the trafficking of international immigrants. These immigrants enter Papua New Guinea, they have fake immigration documents, fake visas, and they are often put to work illegally or they are sold into sex rings in the case of women and children. Since these people do not have the proper documentation to be within the country, it is very difficult for the government to keep track of them and to actually do anything about the conditions that they are experiencing. And some of the countries that actually contribute the most to this are China, Malaysia, and Indonesia. But basically, all the countries surrounding Papua New Guinea have immigrants who go to Papua New Guinea to seek work conditions, and they sadly are put in through this trafficking ring. So, potential solutions for trafficking in Papua New Guinea. As I mentioned earlier, Papua New Guinea did go from a tier 3 to a tier 2 country, and this occurred over the past 3 years. Again, this means that they are increasing their attempts to end human trafficking. They're not simply standing around and doing nothing. However, when it comes to implementation, Papua New Guinea does have a set of laws regarding trafficking with their labor laws and such similar laws, but they do fail to implement them and they fail to apprehend crimes regarding human trafficking. And again, they've increased their efforts, but I personally think that some of the things they could do to enforce these laws and to stop human trafficking is to register newborn children into a government system to prevent domestic trafficking. Most of the children that are trafficked are a part of tribal communities who live in rural areas, who live in the wooded areas of the island. And a lot of these people do not have access to hospitals or healthcare. So when women get pregnant, they end up having their children at home and not really exposing them to any type of government system until they're a little older. And if they were to be registering children, they would be able to keep better track of these children and make sure that if anyone is missing or if there's someone using false documentations, they could find it a lot faster. And they could also increase their borders to prevent immigrant trafficking. So make sure these people are coming in with proper documentation or providing documentation for them when they arrive to Papua New Guinea. And they also do need a better law enforcement infrastructure to focus on missing persons cases and on human trafficking cases so that it can be stopped and so that it can be prevented from happening from now on. And these are my works cited, and this has been Human Trafficking in Papua New Guinea. Thank you for your time.